Hello and welcome back to chapter Back to the Basics. It is now time to talk about test implementation and test execution. Test implementation is the process of developing and prioritizing test procedure, creating test data and preparing the test harness, and writing automated scripts. Mainly, this is the last step prior to execution, and this is where we make sure that all prerequisites are met. As a set of actions, tests are organized and prioritized. Test designs are implemented as concrete test cases, and test procedures are associated with the relevant data. During this time, we need to make sure that environments and code is delivered. We check all constraints, risks, issues in order to assess them, mitigate them, and establish the priorities for the execution phase. Once this assessment is done, we do the final checks on the test team to confirm that we have who we need, where we need, and ready to do what we need. We should always cross-check versus the entry criteria for the test level, make sure that we document the inputs, we document the expected results and other details of the test steps as we decided during design, either generic or detailed test cases. And also, do not forget about automation. Besides creating the scripts, we also establish when and where we run automated tests versus the manual ones, and we settle this during implementation. During test implementation, we should also keep in mind the following. The more detailed the procedures, the more effort it will take, so it makes sense to start early. You should understand the software development lifecycle and be able to predict on which software features and during which test levels to embark on lengthy implementation stages and where to keep it simple. And that during this stage you can also identify further weaknesses in the software specifications. Some of the challenges you will face are the need for product-like data, and here you need to be careful with client data privacy, the need for new tools that might be required, especially for load, volume, or performance testing, and as some defects can only be found in production-like environments, you may have a lot on your hands to manage this kind of systems that are expensive to procure but also difficult to configure and maintain. During test implementation, some organizations tend to expect tests to provide clear evidence of compliance to applicable standards, follow the IEEE 829 standard, and here I urge you to skim through this. It's public information and available on the internet, and archive the results for long term in order to reuse or support audit requirements. I know we talked a lot about test implementation, but prior to moving to execution, I would just like to further underline the following areas that I have already mentioned in this lesson. During test implementation, you should pick the right tests and run them in the right order, sort out all dependencies prior to execution, like tests, data, environments, and so on. Assess and prepare yourself with proper mitigation for the risks and find solutions for the issues identified so far. And always double check the criteria for the execution. Check that the schedule is clear and that the team is ready before you move to the next stage. As a reminder, I would like us to go through the following. Test suites are groups of test scripts and their execution schedule. Test cases are sets of preconditions, inputs, actions, expected results, and post conditions, all of them based on the test conditions. Test scripts are sequences of instructions for the execution of a test, and a test charter is a set of instructions of test goals and possible test ideas on how to test. For example, this is used as a documentation of test activities in session-based exploratory testing. Finally, we have reached test execution. After all that preparation, it is time to run a test on the component or the system in order to produce the actual results. And that's it. Sounds simple, right? But please keep in mind that we should not start prior to confirming that the test objective is delivered and that the entry criteria is met. As a minimum, tests should be designed or at least defined prior to execution start. Tools should be in place, especially for tracking, defect reporting, and test automation. And standards for defect logging and reporting should be available and communicated to the teams involved. During this stage, your role as a test manager is mainly to monitor progress according to the test plan and initiate and carry out control actions to drive towards a successful conclusion as per the objectives or as defined in the test strategy or test plan for each individual test level. During test execution, I would recommend that you also consider traceability from test results back to test conditions or the test basis, reserve time for experience-based sessions or defect-based testing techniques. Testers should be allowed and encouraged to cover additional interesting test scenarios and behaviors that are observed during testing. Adjust the detail of logging as per the test strategy and as per the test level plan. Testers should log what they do as they do it, not later, not at the end of the week. And you as the test manager need to ensure that these logs are provided in order to have an adequate record with relevant details for what was tested and the events that occurred. It is now time to look back at our example. As we did during test analysis and test design, we are going to focus on the same payment system. Let's first look at the component test level. What do we do here during our test implementation? First of all, we make sure that our environment is ready. This is easy as we test on the same environment where we develop at this stage, based on what we agreed during the test strategy, but also a common habit for component or unit testing. There is no need to create specific priority for testing, as the developers will focus to test what they have developed as per their development strategy and approach. Test data also remains in the hand of the development team, together with the preparation and creation of automated tests for this level. In this case, there is no specific criteria checked because this is a very dynamic stage and we move towards to execution without a lot of formality. During the execution stage, the developers test as per an experience-based approach and compare the results with the expected ones. There is no formal logging put in place in order to facilitate the speed not only for testing but also for fixing and retesting those fixes. The progress is monitored and reported together with the development reporting and not tracked differently for our component test. And in any case, this is something that can happen in my example, as in a lot of cases within multiple industries. Usually component and unit testing is done together with development. There are cases where component and unit tests are kept separately, but for this example project, we prefer to keep it simple, especially due to the high dynamics of the development and unit test. In order to highlight and show you the differences between unit and system test level, Let's skip component integration testing and jump directly to system test in this example. If you remember, for system test, we had a test plan and we separated test analysis from test design. Now, in test implementation, we proceed to prepare the dedicated test environment and make sure that we have accurate and scrambled production data. Make sure that the test design is implemented in concrete test cases with the correct test data. Prepare the automated scripts aimed at testing all modules of the system. Assure that the test team is ready, they have a clear responsibility, they have a proper split between manual and automated tests, and that all team members are ready to start execution. Create priorities for the test suites and establish the approach and order of these suites as per the test plan. And also assess the risks and issues and make sure that we know how we are tracking, logging, and assuring that the compliance guidelines are met. We seem to be almost ready to start execution. Now, prior to starting this, we need to assess where we are versus the test level criteria in order to confirm if it is met. See, it seems that we have a big load of work to do in implementation, but testing can be like a wedding. Preparations make for a proper execution. The less you prepare, the more you will have to think on the spot and sort out on the go during the execution timeline. Now, once all that is done, the execution starts. It must be tracked and reported on. Progress must always be monitored versus the plan, and you should always take corrective action if you fall outside of the pre-agreed tolerances for this test level. Traceability and defect design are a good set of metrics that we can use to find the areas of focus for our experience-based testing or for our defect-seeking test sessions. And as we have mentioned before, we should always consider some ad hoc tests for the higher test levels like system test, user acceptance test, based on the input and based on the kind of issues we previously encountered. Do not forget, there is one test principle that you should always remember, and that is the principle related to exhaustive testing. Another thing that we need to cover in our project system test is to make sure that the logging, tracking, and any other procedures defined in the test plan are followed by the team. It is a test manager's responsibility to make sure that the test plan is followed for each test level. As you can see, the approach and work we do in unit test versus system test is quite different for our payment system within our project. But what we should keep in mind is that they need to be tailored as per the policy or strategy or test approach, test plan defined for that test level, and especially that at the end of each test level, we need to meet the levels agreed for the exit criteria in order to proceed with test closure.